The war against the Mnemosyne Collective was a war for the soul of the galaxy. They were an enemy unlike any the Terran Federation had ever faced. Their ships were phantoms, their weapons were whispers, and their battlefield was the fragile landscape of the mind itself. The Mnemosyne were a psychic hive mind, and they waged war not with plasma or kinetics, but with a targeted, overwhelming broadcast of pure despair. Their method was insidious and brutally effective. They would psionically link with an enemy fleet, and then, with the cold precision of a surgeon, they would sever the neural pathways associated with hope, courage, and resolve. They didn't need to destroy ships. They simply made the crews forget why they were fighting. A wave of profound, existential apathy would wash over a fleet. Captains would abandon their posts, pilots would drift aimlessly, and entire armies would lay down their weapons, not in surrender, but in a quiet, soul-crushing acceptance of utter futility. The Terran fleet, for all its vaunted resilience, was crumbling. Ship after ship went silent, not with the roar of an explosion, but with the quiet, chilling hum of life support systems tending to crews who had simply given up. They were adrift in a sea of their own manufactured despair, their minds hollowed out, their spirits extinguished. On the bridge of the TDFS Resilience, Fleet Admiral Anya Sharma watched the tactical display, her face a mask of grim frustration. Another battle group, the 14th Fleet, had just gone dark. No explosions, no distress calls. Just a slow, silent fade from the command network. "They're picking us apart," she muttered, her voice a low growl. "We can't fight them. Our psionic dampeners are useless. Our shields can't block a thought. How do you fight an enemy that makes you forget how to fight?" Her chief psychological officer, Dr. Elias Vance, stood beside her. He was a quiet, intense man, his eyes holding a deep, almost painful empathy. He was a counselor, a new breed of officer, a powerful telepath whose primary role was to maintain the morale and mental fortitude of the fleet. So far, against the Mnemosyne, he had failed. He could build walls in the minds of his crew. He could soothe their fears. But he could not hold back the all-consuming tide of the Mnemosyne's despair broadcast. "Their weapon is a perfect negative," Elias said, his voice barely a whisper. "It is the absence of will. It doesn't attack. It simply erases. It erases hope. It erases purpose. It is a broadcast of pure, logical nihilism, and it is flawlessly effective." "So, what's the alternative, Doctor?" Anya snapped, her frustration boiling over. "Do we just float here and wait for them to turn our brains to mush?" Elias was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant, as if listening to a conversation a universe away. He had been a student of human history, of the strange, chaotic, and often contradictory tapestry of the human emotional spectrum. And he knew that humanity possessed an emotional state that the Mnemosyne, in their cold, logical pursuit of despair, could never comprehend. "No, Admiral," he said, his voice suddenly firm, a new chilling resolve in his eyes. "We don't. Wait. We broadcast something back. We fight their perfect negative with our most powerful, most chaotic, and most profoundly human positive. We fight their despair not with hope, not with courage, not with anger. We fight it with grief." Anya stared at him, bewildered. "Grief? You want to fight a despair weapon by broadcasting sadness? How is that supposed to help?" "Because human grief is not a simple negative, Admiral," Elias explained, a strange, almost painful light in his eyes. "It is not the absence of something. It is a presence. It is the echo of love. It is the testament to a connection that was so profound, its loss leaves a wound that shapes the very soul. It is pain, yes, but it is a pain that is inextricably woven with love, with memory, with a fierce protective resolve. It is a paradox. and I believe it is a paradox that the Mnemosyne's purely logical minds will not be able to compute. He turned to the Admiral, his decision made. I need access to the primary broadcast array, and I need a direct, unfiltered link to the historical archives of Old Earth. I am going to find the single, most powerful, most unified expression of human grief and resolve in our entire history, and I am going to broadcast it directly into their hive mind. His target was a single archived data point, a day of profound tragedy and even more profound resilience, a day the galaxy had long forgotten, but which was burned into the very soul of the human species. The day was September 11th, 2001. The historical archives of Old Earth were a chaotic, messy, and often painful place. They were a testament to humanity's turbulent past, a library of our triumphs, our follies, and our profound capacity for both creation and destruction. Elias Vance, his mind shielded against the psychic whispers of the Mnemosyne, delved into this digital ghost of a world, his consciousness sifting through centuries of data. He was not looking for images of the attack itself. The Mnemosyne dealt, in despair, but they were not interested in the simple shock of violence. They were interested in the aftermath, in the slow, creeping erosion of will. So, Elias looked past the initial horror of that day. He was looking for the emotional resonance of the day after. He accessed the archived global communication logs. From September 12, 2001, he saw not a species shattered by fear, but a species united in a way it had never been before. He saw the frantic, desperate messages of love, of hope, of defiance. He saw the surge of volunteers, the outpouring of support from every corner of a planet that had, just the day before, been a patchwork of competing nations and ideologies. He saw the raw data of a billion different stories, a billion different expressions of a single, powerful, and paradoxical emotion. He accessed the personal logs of a firefighter who had survived the collapse of the North Tower. He felt the man's overwhelming grief, the searing pain of losing his comrades. But intertwined with that grief, he felt an even more powerful emotion, a fierce, protective love for his city, a burning resolve to go back, to keep searching, to save just one more life. He accessed the memories of a woman who had lost her husband. On one of the flights, he felt her soul-shattering sorrow, the gaping void of her loss. But he also felt her stubborn, defiant refusal to let that sorrow be the end of his story. He felt her determination to raise their children, to keep his memory alive, to live a life that would honor his sacrifice. He accessed the global data streams, the images of candlelight vigils in cities from Tokyo to London, from Cairo to Rio. He felt the shared, silent grief of an entire species, a wave of empathy that transcended borders, languages, and cultures. This was it. This was the weapon. It was not a single, pure emotion. It was a chaotic, messy, and profoundly human symphony. It was grief, yes, but it was a grief that was inseparable from love. It was pain, but it was a pain that gave birth to resolve. It was despair, but it was a despair that was fiercely, defiantly, and beautifully intertwined with hope. It was a paradox that the Mnemosyne, with their perfect logical understanding of despair as a simple negative, would not be able to comprehend. "I have it, Admiral," Elias transmitted to the bridge of the resilience, his own mind aching with the weight of the memories he had just witnessed. "I have the broadcast. It is the most painful thing I have ever experienced, and it is the most beautiful." Elias Vance stood in the psychic broadcast chamber of the resilience, a spherical room lined with shimmering, crystalline amplifiers. He was the conduit, the focus point. The archived emotional data from September 12, 2001 was ready to be, transmitted not as images or sounds, but as pure, unfiltered psionic energy. "All ships," Admiral Sharma's voice echoed through the chamber. "Prepare for psychic feedback. The counselor is about to go live. Brace for emotional turbulence." Elias closed his eyes. He opened his mind, and he began to broadcast. The Mnemosyne hive mind, in its cold, serene confidence, was in the process of dismantling the Terran 7th Fleet. It had them enveloped in its field of perfect, logical despair. Their crews were succumbing, their wills fading. Then the human broadcast hit them. It was not the chaotic, fearful static they had expected. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated, and utterly baffling emotional energy. The Mnemosyne's collective consciousness, a being of pure, logical nihilism, was suddenly flooded with the raw, paradoxical grief of September 12th. They felt the searing pain of loss, a billion souls crying out in unison. But intertwined with that pain, they felt something else, a fierce, protective love, an unyielding, defiant resolve, a sense of unity so profound, so absolute, that it defied all their models of individualistic, self-serving behavior. Their logic began to fracture. Anomaly detected. A fragment of the Mnemosyne hive mind projected, its usually serene thought pattern now tinged with confusion. The human broadcast contains a high-amplitude despair signal, but it is contaminated. It is interwoven with a positive emotional frequency. This is a logical contradiction. The Mnemosyne tried to filter out the positive contamination, to isolate the pure despair they understood. But they couldn't. The two emotions were one and the same. The grief was the love. The pain was the resolve. It was a single, unified, and profoundly illogical emotional state. On the bridge of a Terran cruiser, a young pilot, who had been on the verge of succumbing to the Mnemosyne's despair, suddenly felt a new, strange emotion wash over him. It was a deep, profound sorrow. But it was not his own. It was the shared, ancient sorrow of his entire species. And in that sorrow, he found an unexpected strength. He gripped his controls, his knuckles white, and he pushed his ship back into formation. He was not just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every soul that had ever been lost, for every heart that had ever been broken. The human fleet, which had been on the brink of collapse, began to rally. They were still, feeling the despair, both their own and the Mnemosyne's, but now they were also feeling the broadcast. They were feeling the strength, the unity, the unbreakable resolve of their own species' most profound moment of shared grief. The Mnemosyne's psychic assault faltered. Their perfect, logical despair was being drowned out by a chaotic, beautiful, and utterly incomprehensible wave of human emotion. The Mnemosyne hive mind, for the first time in its long existence, was experiencing a new, terrifying emotion: confusion. Their weapon, their very reason for being, was failing. They were not just being resisted, they were being understood, and then recontextualized. Elias Vance, his own mind a raging torrent of shared grief and resolve, pushed the broadcast deeper. He sent not just the immediate aftermath, but the stories that followed. He sent the stories of the first responders who had climbed into the burning towers, knowing they would not come back down. He sent the stories of the passengers on Flight 93 who had, in their final moments, chosen defiance over submission. He sent the stories of a city, a nation, a world that had refused to be broken. The Mnemosyne's collective consciousness was now being bombarded with concepts that defied their very understanding of existence. Self-sacrifice for strangers. Courage in the face of certain death. A love so powerful that it transcended the fear of oblivion. Their despair. It is not a weakness, a Mnemosyne thought fragment projected, its logical structure wavering. It is a catalyst. It is the source of their strength. They do not run from pain. They build monuments to it. The Mnemosyne, a species that had only ever seen emotion as a tool for control, was now being shown emotion as a source of power. Their perfect, logical understanding of the universe was being systematically dismantled by the messy, beautiful, and often painful reality of the human heart. The human fleet, now fully rallied, their spirits ablaze with the shared defiant grief of their ancestors, went on the offensive. They fought with a ferocity the Mnemosyne had never encountered. They were not just soldiers fighting a war. They were the living embodiment of their species' unbreakable will. The Mnemosyne's phantom ships began to flicker, to destabilize. Their psychic network, overloaded with paradoxical human emotion, was beginning to collapse. The perfect, harmonious symphony of their hive mind was being shattered by a single powerful and utterly human song of sorrow and defiance. The battle ended not with a final, glorious explosion, but with a quiet, profound implosion. The Mnemosyne hive mind, unable to process the paradoxical nature of human grief, fractured. Their fleets, no longer guided by a unified consciousness, drifted aimlessly in the void. The war was over. Elias Vance collapsed in the broadcast chamber, his body racked with the echoes of 1 billion different souls, his mind a scarred but ultimately triumphant battlefield. He had shown the galaxy and himself the true terrifying power of the human heart. The Concordance, though they didn't fully understand the victory, acknowledged its profound impact. Humanity had won a war by weaponizing not their anger, not their hatred, but their deepest, most profound sorrow. They had taught a galaxy of logical, passionless beings that true strength was not the absence of pain, but the ability to find meaning and purpose and an unbreakable resolve within it. The Mnemosyne, though defeated, were not annihilated. The fractured remnants of their hive mind, no longer capable of weaponizing despair, became isolated, contemplative beings. Some, in a strange, ironic twist, became scholars of human history, trying to understand the species that had defeated them with an emotion. They studied our art, our music, our stories of love and loss, forever haunted by the echo of a single terrible and beautiful day. In the aftermath of the Mnemosyne War, humanity's place in the galaxy was forever changed. We were no longer just the chaotic, emotional newcomers. We were the species that had faced down the ultimate psychological weapon and had won. We were the ones who understood the true, complex nature of the soul. Dr. Elias Vance, the quiet, empathetic counselor, became a figure of immense respect and not a little fear. He had shown the galaxy that human emotion, in all its messy, contradictory glory, was a force to be reckoned with. The Galactic Concordance, in a profound shift in its understanding of sentience, began to study the concept of emotion not as a flaw, but as a fundamental aspect of life. They learned about courage, about love, about sacrifice. They learned that a species' strength was not just in its technology, but in its stories, in its memories, in the scars it carried. The human fleet, now battle-hardened and forever changed, became the guardians of a new kind of peace, a peace that was not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding, of empathy, of a shared galactic memory. Elias, in his later years, would often stand on the observation deck of his ship, looking out at the silent, beautiful stars. He still carried the echoes of September, 12th within him, a constant, quiet hum of grief and resolve. It was a heavy burden, but it was also a source of immense strength. He had shown the galaxy a profound and terrifying truth, that the human spirit, forged in the fires of its own history, was a thing of unimaginable power. He had shown them that our greatest tragedies were not the source of our weakness, but the very foundation of our unbreakable will. He had shown them that even in the face of the most profound despair, humanity would always find a way to stand up, to rebuild, to remember, and in that remembrance, to find the strength to face any darkness and to overcome it. The Empath's broadcast was a testament to the fact that sometimes the most powerful song in the universe is the one sung in a key of sorrow, but with a chorus of unwavering, defiant hope.